ladies and gentlemen. My name is Mike Larkin, one half of the S&M Show podcast, and I'm back today with another interview. I am on the line with the very talented Mr. Killer Kross. Kross, how you doing today, sir? It's a pleasure to be talking to you.
Thank you.
Awesome. I got to say, first and foremost, congratulations. As we saw last week on Impact, that you were the mystery attacker, taking out one Petey Williams. Congratulations on the Impact, on getting signed, just with doing your thing with Impact, man. I really did enjoy that whole dynamic of that segment.
Thank you. The feedback has been really tremendous, and very grateful for that. And the original fan base that I have plugged in prior to Impact has been really, really happy with it as well. As anyone would find out, if you've been following my career prior to now, there's a little something different about my presentation, and it has had a lot to do with things that the crowd have given me, and I've ran with it, and things from my own presentation and interpretation of what I think could be different and what could have a great presence on television. So they're very happy that the continuity between what I was doing before and what I'm currently doing now is present. So I'm very happy with that.
I gotta say, I love the whole thing about your character, and that's actually what I wanted to talk about first and foremost before we get into your story. And you have a great career, great opponents as well. But Killer, I'd like to talk about the origin of the Killer Kross gimmick, because like I said, I love the dynamic of it. I love the character as a whole. Tell us about the origins of the character.
Well, the origins of the character basically came in as a bodyguard for a promoter, and the thing kind of just took off in its own direction following that. I had some ideas and some inspirations from a variety of different things, ranging anywhere from the movie Bronson to Dark City. There's shades of Jack Napier, pre-Joker, Tim Burton stuff, Brian Pillman. I mean, I've really just, lots of different things. Roddy Piper, there's a lot of different colors in there, so to speak, for lack of explain it. But it still has its own spirit. And it just kind of developed over time. Just literature that I've read throughout my entire life, things, cinematography inspired me with different things. And and the crowd as well. I mean, any moniker, I got a million monikers. Any of them that I've ever gotten have either been from the crowds at the arenas, things that the crowd just kind of hooked onto, latched onto, and kind of put it on me. I ran with it. And then things from social media as well that people had put out there. There was a transition a few years ago from Kevin Kross to Killer Kross. And I believe that all began with a match in North Carolina with Shane Douglas. And the finish of that match was I'd taken the tape off of my wrists and I'd wrapped it around his neck. I basically put him in a rear naked choke with the tape, and people were saying he was trying to kill Shane Douglas. And then Killer Kross basically just kind of stuck with me from there.
And it's like I said, it's great to see the evolution of it, because you've been in so many promotions, whether it be Future Stars or Wrestling, the original Global Force Wrestling, which we're going to get into. Just like I said, the overall, transition and the evolution of the character is great, and it's great to see you on the main stage and just doing your thing.
Yeah, from working all over the world to being around brilliant minds like Tommy Dreamer as well with House of Hardcore, I've been provided with a lot of really excellent direction in terms of executing some of my own ideas, so just optimizing the things that I can bring to the table. It's been a crazy ride, and I'm looking forward to the future.
You got it. One thing I wanted to talk about first, coming through, as far as pro wrestling goes, talk about, getting your start and who was some of your influences, and was there either defining moment or matchup that you said, this is something that I want to pursue?
Well, I would say, my influences, a lot of guys will say that they have, a favorite wrestler. And I can't really tell you that I've ever had a favorite wrestler. I always feel like that's it's very strange for me, just to single out one person. I've always been, really inspired by a ton of people. I've been watching wrestling since I was a kid. Some of my first memories I've ever had have been wrestling. I remember wrestling before I even remember doing things, as a little kid, as a baby. If I had to narrow it down to one person, I would probably say Brian Pillman was the absolute most inspirational person I'd ever watched. And that probably strikes people a little bit strangely, because usually people think of wrestling ability and people think about technical guys, people always throw Ric Flair out there, or Ricky the Dragon Steamboat, or Macho Man, or or Hogan or Warrior or something like that. Those guys weren't so much on the technical side; they were more showmen. But I've always appreciated technical wrestling. You know, Gary Albright, Steve Williams, Kenta Kobashi, Misawa, Taz, all those guys, Kurt Angle, Brock. I've always really thoroughly enjoyed all of that. But in terms of being inspired to do this, I would say Pillman did it. Pillman did it for me because to this very day, there are things that he's done on television and even on house shows or even things on the road that aren't really, widely well known in a business where people are so certain that they know the difference between fiction and nonfiction, they never knew with Pillman. And I think that is magic right there. And it's not something that can be taught. And I think that if you have that ability or you hone that ability to really blur the lines for people, that's what people are actually watching for. And I think that's incredible. As for my first break, I would say, I always wanted to get involved with wrestling, and I was looking for a wrestling academy. And I went into Future Stars of Wrestling Academy in Las Vegas. And the first month I started training, I had already begun performing and wrestling in front of people. And my original coaches were Iron Mike Modest from Noah, Japan, and believe it or not, Disco Inferno.
Oh, wow. Okay, well, yeah, as far as Disco Inferno, I've heard he's done a lot of training over there as well. So, well, that's another one as well, Disco Inferno. People say what they will about him, but you cannot pretty much, you're pretty much, I'll say it bluntly, you can't shit on what he did for WCW. I mean, he was an integral part of that company, very entertaining, and he does have a mind, you know what I'm saying? I'm sure you've learned a lot from him.
Oh, completely. And, Disco has very thick skin and does not care whatsoever at all about the derogatory or negative opinions people have over him. He legitimately really doesn't, and more or less thinks it's funny. And if you think about it, the clown in the circus, the jester, is probably the smartest guy in the room because he can go out there and he can emasculate himself to elicit, a reaction from the audience. He is the maestro. He can make the crowd laugh. He can make the crowd cry. He can make the crowd believe him, or he can turn the crowd against him. And I've always thought of Disco as the master clown of the circus. He's a genius, and to such a level where people will never know because he'll never let them. He can teach things well beyond what he can do, and that's one of his greatest secrets.
And what's great about Future Stars of Wrestling is you've done a lot of great work with them as well. I mean, you've had matches with guys like Sinbo D there, Funny Bone, Tyshawn Prince, Brian Cage, Kenny King. Just talk about working with those individuals and just the whole nine.
Well, unfortunately, I haven't worked with Future Stars of Wrestling in an extraordinary amount of time. But in the beginning, yeah, I mean, I had worked with Brian Cage. I had worked with Timothy Thatcher. I was really, really, really fighting to get Timothy Thatcher out to Las Vegas and let the West Coast see him, specifically Las Vegas. It's the entertainment mecca of the world, in my opinion, at least the country. And for it not to have a strong base of professional wrestling, I mean, now it does. But at the time when I was getting in, I didn't really think it did. And that was one thing that I was really, really keen on contributing. I had a school to learn from, and I had opportunities to go out there and hit home runs. And, that was my contribution to the wrestling scene here in the way that I wanted to give back was I wanted people to know about Future Stars Wrestling because nobody did. It was just a small city company. And my goal was to turn myself into an investment and get good enough that this whole country and possibly parts of the world could be talking about FSW. And here we are. It's been a while since I've been there and we're talking about them. And I love that. I love that because that means that my work actually meant something for you to know about them and not live here. And for all the other people that are talking about it that don't know about them, never seen a show and are talking about them, that's really important to me. So it's a great company and it's got a lot of great talent. And it was just a blast. I mean, Eli Drake was another guy I had worked with for about a year and he's on Impact. Just so many great matches. Reno Scum. Hammerstone is another guy that will be on television inevitably. He's been wrestling all over the United States and is actually currently wrestling periodically in Japan. Mm-hmm. And yeah, I mean, it's a great company. I had a great start there.
Now, as I turn the page on my notes here, this one I have to mention as well because I wanted to touch base on GFW as well because you were in the original GFW. You got to go against guys like Bobby Roode, Brian Myers. Your training session, which you trained in 109 degrees, was featured on the GFW Amped Anthology. I mean, just talk about your overall experience working with GFW.
I had a great time working with Global Force, and that was really my time period to get to meet and know Jeff and Karen were great people. And I would even feel comfortable enough to call them friends. and it was just it was an excellent experience. I got to meet Sanjay there, and I got to know Scott D'Amore, and it was just a really good experience. I can't say enough good things about it. It didn't pan out the way everybody thought it would for a variety of different reasons that I had nothing to do with. I don't really know exactly what fell through, but I really cherished the experience. On the other hand, it's my presentation, although I was happy with it, I wasn't satisfied with it. And I'll tell you, the reason being is because I was still in a development phase of learning how to project all of these ideas that I had in my head and manifest them in such a way where everyone could understand them across the boards. And it's just like any artist. I mean, if you imagine, I'm not comparing myself to Picasso whatsoever at all, but could you imagine what people were thinking when they first started Picasso painting? They're thinking, like, what the hell's wrong with this guy? Is he dehydrated? Get this guy a glass of water. Like, he's painting these crooked photos, and, it's just, it wasn't conventional art. And I feel like in that parallel, I could say that the things that I do are fairly unconventional. And to try to explain that to people and get them to believe and invest in it with such a short amount of time before we started filming TV, it was impossible. So I went out there and I did what I was told to do. And I did my best to try to get my ideas over. Now that I've had more time and more experience in working all over the world with different minds and bodies and so forth, it's much easier for me now to convey these concepts, because now I have a much larger and expansive body of work for people to review. And that's why you're seeing Killer Kross in the way that I've projected him previously in other companies on the independents on television now. So it was a great experience. That's all I can say.
Now, you got to work with Bobby Roode. I know you guys did a GFW, I believe it was a quarterfinal match for the championship, and you got to work him and Brian Myers in a triple threat. Talk about working with those participants.
Oh, they're great, man. They're absolute pros. It was an enjoyable experience. It was so funny, too, because, I just had a feeling, when I had met Bobby, and everybody had this feeling, when you saw him, you just knew. You're like, he's going to be in WWE one day. I just wonder, how long it's going to be, or if maybe he doesn't want to be there. Maybe he's really comfortable where he is. But just the way he works and the way he puts things together and the way his mind is really very thoroughly attached and committed and focused into everything he's doing, it was so easy to work with him. And it was a lot of fun. And he himself is a great maestro to the audience, as you can see now more than ever with the whole Glorious thing. Very cool stuff. And then, Brian Myers, again, I feel like that guy is probably one of the best wrestlers in the world, despite the way he's projected on television. And a lot of people think that, they're just burying him. They're just doing this. They're just doing that. People get mad about it. He's getting airtime. So nobody's ever really getting buried if they're getting airtime, believe me, because airtime costs a lot of money. So he's being used in a function that they see fit to put him in for whatever reason, long term or whatever. But I'm just saying, from my personal opinion, I think he's just as good as AJ Styles from a technical standpoint, because I've seen him go. And if you're a fan of Brian Myers and you've seen his work, you know he can do a lot more than what he's doing right now, which is not any fault to him whatsoever. That's just, we're all actors in a play, so to speak. So you're going to go out there and you're going to do what you're told. And that's exactly what he's doing. Both of those guys, excellent wrestlers and pros, thick and thin.
I'll give you a funny story about Brian Myers. So growing up in New York, the two big schools out there, the New York Wrestling Connection, which Brian was a part of, along with him and Zack Ryder, and a lot of great talented people came from there. And I know he's doing his thing now with Creative Pro. A lot of great kids coming from there. So people will say about what they will about Brian Myers. Oh, he's this, and they bury him, like you mentioned. But the dude has a mind, and he knows what he's doing.
Yeah. 100%. There's no doubt about it. And I'm saying that from a practical standpoint, too, like actually meeting the guy and working with him is another guy who's just brilliant. I mean, he can do anything he wants, in my opinion.
Agreed, man. And, okay, now we talk about a lot of great people you got to work with. This one I wanted to touch base on. I know you did some work for West Coast Wrestling Connection, and I believe you got a chance to work with Mr. Gangrel, Vampire Warrior, whatever you want to call him. Talk about working with Gangrel.
Oh, man, I love that guy. I see him every once in a while at conventions, and I see him at, random Midwest shows that I'm on and stuff like that. I miss his presence. He has such a unique energy, such a unique personality. I'll tell you just a very quick, kind of oblivious story, but it's kind of funny if you think about it, if you just visualize this and walk with me for a minute. So years ago when I was working at that company, I had worked, I think I was on the road for maybe 5 or 6 days prior to getting to Oregon. And I wasn't sleeping much, which is, kind of par for the course with what we do. Between working in different time zones and stuff, I think I just got back from Japan. So I was on Japan time, and I'm sitting in the lobby. I had like the absolute worst sleep ever. We're all having breakfast together in the lobby, and I'm sitting there. My eyes are burning. Physically, like my shoulders are sunk. I just got up and had a bad sleep. And, I'm just banged up from days and days and days. And I'm sitting there, and my breakfast is in front of me, and I'm so tired I can't even eat it. And I just feel like I feel this hand on my shoulder. It's a soft, gentle hand, almost like an angel. And I slowly look over my shoulder, and I look up, and it's Gangrel. And his teeth are in, and he's just like, "What's the matter, kid? Here, have an apple." It's like this demon vampire is standing over my shoulder with this angelic hand, and he passes me an apple. It's just, I don't know what it was about that, but I still laugh about it now. It's just funny. I don't know. It's just like the devil was standing over my shoulder giving me an apple, and you were thinking otherwise. It was just like, it was just so funny. I just blew up laughing, and he starts laughing, and he sits down next to me, and I just immediately started feeling better. He has that healing aura around him, at least for me. I mean, it was awesome. And then working with him was so cool. He's probably one of the toughest people in the business. He likes to give and receive, so to speak. He's in there, man. Everything he's doing, he's laying it in, and he expects it back, which is so cool, because I have gotten nervous that if I get into my fourth gear, we have to cut the match short, but not with him. He's a really tough dude.
I gotta say this, I have two thoughts on him. Number one, I have the picture of the legendary Gangrel walk as he walks to the ring, spits the blood, and do that after after that whole thing with the apple. That is very funny. And number two, just the whole nine. I mean, look at the guy. I mean, speaking of one of the toughest, obviously, also as well, he's married to the late, great Luna Vachon as well. So there's a lot of, you know what they say? People say about that as well. But from a time period when he started doing that whole Brood thing, and, Edge and Christian, the Hardy Boys came along, but he was really he was another guy that was just, say what you will. Oh, we didn't have the title. He wasn't top guard. But for what he accomplished in his career, the man's a tough dude. You can't say nothing but great things about Gangrel.
Absolutely. And for anybody who's a fan of him listening, I can tell you right now, he loves her so much. Anytime he ever brings her up, and he does, period, he talks about her with such respect, such love. I had to get choked up listening to his stories. Just, the man really loved her, and it's so cool, of all people, that the two of them fell in love and shared a life together for a time while she was still here, because they're just so eccentric in their own ways, you know what I mean?
Well, yeah, and you also got to admit, people talk about the evolution with wrestling, and I think 2018 is probably one of the best times with any company in wrestling. I mean, you look at according with the women, like Luna Vachon, you have to put her in the name of women that helped pave the way for the women that we see today. Intergender wrestling is doing its thing. People talk about the whole James Ellsworth, and it's very Andy Kaufman-esque, like we have back with the 80s with the whole intergender championship deal. But what Lucha Underground does, and I know you've been in the ring with Taya Valkyrie, who's a big proponent about that. I mean, intergender wrestling is another big thing nowadays.
Yeah, her and John are very close friends of mine, and a lot of people don't know this for the right reasons, but I've actually been with Lucha Underground since season 2, working with them. We were just waiting for the right time to launch that character presentation, and you'll see it in season 4, which just aired June 13th. So we're rolling right now on El Rey, El work, and then I don't know for sure, but I'm certain that once season 4 is finished, probably 3 and 4 are going to go up on Netflix. That's nothing official. I'm just saying I think, and I don't know when that would be. However, I got to meet Johnny Mundo and Taya on season 2, and I've been very close friends with them ever since. They just got married, by the way.
Yes.
And the both of them are outstanding. Taya being able to work with the guys and being able to break down those barriers. A lot of people talk about the women's revolution and stuff like that, and I'm not taking away from anything that anyone's doing for that. I think it's fantastic. I think it's great. I think it's about time. But if you want to talk about women revolutionizing the business, you should really pay attention, not you specifically, but in generalities. People should really smart themselves up to the things that Taya has done, because from Canada, not speaking a word of Spanish, all the way to Mexico, taught herself how to speak the language and worked in a very hyper-aggressive, unfriendly, dangerous environment and got over. And I think she had a 2-year title run, which no one had ever done. She did that as a foreigner. I mean, that's actually insane. Never mind the history of work that she's had prior to that. It's been pretty amazing, and I think it's cool. And I'm also a very big fan of Andy Kaufman, so I love all that stuff. I think it's great what we're doing. I think it's, 2018, people know professional wrestling is a performance art. And I think that as long as the execution of what we are doing on television is sincere and somewhat makes sense, I think that you can blend as much fiction into this as you want, because people know, or at least they have a general concept of how much is real and how much isn't. And I think that just being as entertaining as possible with a strong execution of sincerity is just going to give for a better show. There's nothing wrong with intergender wrestling.
100%. Now, and I had to bring that up because I always get like the 50-50 on it, like, oh, putting hands on a woman and this and that. And I'm like, but you know what it is too? Like, you even see in training classes, like, the guys go against the girls and stuff like that too. So, personally, I got no problem with it. I mean, I think the girls, let me clarify with you on this as well, Killer. You got to admit, some of those girls, or pretty much a majority of those girls, will kick our butts. Because, my God, we have some of the toughest women out there right now.
Yeah, I've always, I think it's just it's laziness how people are approaching when they say that. And I don't think it comes from a malicious standpoint, but you got to exercise some critical thinking. The problem is not their gender. Mm-hmm. The problem is the weight difference. So it's like, remove the gender from the concept. I mean, as a performer, as a professional, if Eli Everfly, who's an indie wrestler, I can't imagine him weighing more than 130, 140 pounds. You're obviously going to have to take that into consideration when you're working with them, just as if you were working with a smaller woman who's 130 or 140 pounds or 110. If I'm 265, I'm not thinking to myself, oh, I'm wrestling a woman. I'm thinking to myself, this is her weight, and, having a general idea of what I can physically do to this person without actually, breaking their spinal cord. Like, those are the things, those are the mechanics that people should be thinking about. From a fan standpoint, a guy beating up a girl, well, we're in the business of storytelling. We're trying to elicit a reaction. You probably should be somewhat uncomfortable that, a guy is wrestling a girl, because that's what we want. That's what creates the allure and the attraction. So it's a double-edged sword. And I think that, for some people, it's off limits, and that's fine. We're not going to shove it down anybody's throat. But for some people, they can enjoy it, and they can understand it and appreciate it, and they can get into the ride we're trying to take them on. That's all we're trying to do. We're just trying to take people on a ride. We're not trying to offend somebody to such a degree where they turn it off, but sometimes we are trying to offend people because there's going to be a payoff down the road, and they just don't see that.
Now, one of the best things about that, because we were talking about Ty and Johnny as well, the work that you've been doing in AAA is amazing. I know you and Johnny and Ty have done your thing. You've got to wrestle guys like El Hijo del Fantasma, Ayako Hamato's been in there, Argenis, and you got to feel great as well, because with the rich history that AAA is, and not all just AAA, just Lucha Libre in general. You think of guys like Mysterio, you think of Psychosis, Juventud Guerrera, La Parca, just the whole nine as far as Mexico goes. How does that make you feel to be a part of like such rich history that is AAA and the whole Lucha Libre scene?
It's really very humbling, man. The very first Lucha Libre match I ever saw was Juventud Guerrera versus Rey Mysterio on ECW. I believe it was 1996.
Yes.
And I had never, ever in my life seen any sort of presentation of pro wrestling like that, ever. And, being a younger kid at the time, I was so allured by the guys wearing masks. As a boy, growing up, it was difficult, when you were pretending or playing outside. I'm from that generation where we played outside. It was difficult, to get into pretending that you were anything but maybe a cop or a cowboy or a ninja. Because with a cowboy, you can put a cowboy hat on. With a cop, you could buy your little plastic badge from the store and you had your little toy handguns. And with a ninja, you can wrap anything around your head and pretend it's a mask, and you go buy your plastic sword. But for me, it was hard to pretend it was Ultimate Warrior unless I had face paint. It was hard to pretend it was Hulk Hogan if I couldn't rip my shirt off. But with Lucha Libre, you could put that mask on, and now you're a luchador as a kid. So I think that allure for kids with Lucha Libre, it's a very powerful thing. Every little kid wanted to be Rey Mysterio as soon as they saw him on TV. Every little kid. And, they go out and they buy the mask, or they put a T-shirt on over their head, or, Halloween time comes, they buy a SWAT team mask, whatever it is. That was my introduction to Lucha Libre. It was Rey and Juvi. And then, we fast forward to now. I'm having opportunities to showcase what I can do in the mecca of Lucha Libre, standing next to Juventud. I can't even tell you how surreal that is sometimes. Like, Juvi's a friend of mine, but every once in a while, when I'm on the tour bus back or I'm flying home, I have to ask myself, I'm like, is this real? Like, how is this actually happening? There's like probably 0.1% of people on the planet that actually meet and get to know guys they watched and idolized on TV. Like, that's just not supposed to happen. So I go through these waves where I'm like, holy cow. It's pretty extraordinary. I'm very, very happy with it. I mean, I can't even, words elude me. It's just an amazing experience. And especially, to the last show we did, that was in Monterey, and it was in a bullfighting arena. Literally, we were in a Coliseum-style venue that was very much like, you guys are going to have to forgive me, the WrestleMania where Undertaker wrestled Giant Gonzalez and the roof was...
Oh, yeah, WrestleMania 9, yep.
Yeah, I mean, it felt like that. And as soon as you hit the stage and everyone is just looking at you and they're screaming and yelling, that energy that they're projecting out of their bodies and their minds, you get a buzz in your skin. Totally nuts. Very, very cool experience.
One thing I do have to mention as well, we talked about Lucha Underground. I just want to go back to this as well, because I think you did have a couple dark matches there. I believe you wrestled like Joey Ryan. I believe Ricky Mandel was in there and Vinny Massaro. I just wanted to clarify that, because I know you did do some work as well. I know you've been there since Season 2, and myself, I'm looking forward to Season 4 and your inclusion in that. But can you talk about working with those guys?
Oh, yeah. All of them. Fun, man. Total blast. Ray Phoenix, Pentagon, Macias, Muertes, for anyone who doesn't know who Macias is. Yeah, it's just been absolutely extraordinary. There was a crazy 6-man we did. I cannot remember everyone in it, but Marty the Moth was in it. Let me think. I had worked with probably half of the roster over the second and third season on Darks, and I can't even, I've been saying it forever, but I can't even convey how amazing that backstage culture is in that locker room. Everyone supports each other there like a family in Lucha. Everybody. And there is a competitive nature of wanting to outshine everybody, not from a malicious standpoint, not to be redundant either, but there is just a crazy amount of internal support to the production, to your coworkers. Everyone is supporting each other to go out there and have the best performance possible, which translates to why the show is so over with the audience and why the people love it there. There's no weird energy. Like, for anyone who's ever had a job and you just don't get along with somebody at work, or you have had some sort of negative altercation with someone or some bad communication, and you have to go into that job 5 days a week, and it's that anxiety of expecting to run into this person. I got to be trapped at this job for 68 hours with this moron or this jerk. There's none of that there. Everyone gets along and supports each other. And what's great about that show, too, is there's no sleeper matches. And people know what the sleeper matches are. They know. Whether they call it that on the head or not, subconsciously they know they put on matches to check whatever it is. There's none of that there. Every single person that walks through that curtain or on that stage is over and gets a reception. Perfect example, Vinny Mazzaro. A lot of people don't know this. Vinny Mazzaro's worked all over the world. He's worked Misawa before he passed away. I mean, he doesn't look like the prototypical pro wrestler that you would imagine. He's not that giant bodybuilder guy. But he knows what he's doing, and he's really funny and very entertaining. I don't know how many matches he's won, maybe 1 or 2 on TV, but it doesn't matter because he's over, and the people love to see him. When they see him, they know he's entertaining. They can't wait to see what he does. I think that's a true testament to an excellent wrestling program, if you even want to call Lucha that. I think it's more of a show about pro wrestling more than a pro wrestling show. But that's amazing that the wins and losses are not held against people on that program because it's so entertaining. And I think that's something very unique that only that show is ever going to have.
I think what's great about also what you mentioned about Vinny is, like, last week was the premiere of the Season 4, Episode 1 of Lucha Underground. He's in the match. He's coming out. They're doing the whole Aztec warfare. When he comes out, the people pop. He's getting the pizza delivered. He takes the Pentagon driver on the pizza. And it doesn't even matter that he was only in there for like 10 seconds. That just the people went crazy for Vinny.
Yeah, and you know what? It's like, yeah, that's Pentagon giving him the driver on the pizza. But after the cover 1, 2, 3, people are gonna die laughing. They go, I love this guy. Mm-hmm. It's not even I love Penta. No, you love Vinny. Like, he's funny. When he's coming out to do something, it's going to be really entertaining. It's just exactly what you said. I agree with you. It's awesome. It's his moment.
Oh, yeah, and it's also because, people also talk about Famous B, and I crack up every time. That's another one. Every time I see Famous B come on my TV screen on Lucha Underground, I crack up. I'm entertaining. I know he's probably going to get killed, but I don't care. He makes me laugh, and I'm entertained.
Yeah, and he's going to be hilarious all the way there, and maybe even hilarious afterwards. That guy's one of the funniest people I've ever met in my life, other than Willie Mack. B is has such a great soul, a great spirit. He's another one of those guys. I believe that he is like a centerpiece to Lucha Underground backstage. He just livens up the whole room. He doesn't even need to come in and do anything or say anything. People are just happy to see him. He's just got such a great spirit. He contributes to things in such a way where he doesn't even know he's contributing. Just his very presence there, people are happy to see him, and they're joking and laughing, and he's a great dude. It's been a great pleasure getting to know him as well.
All right. Now, this is the time where we're going to talk about it. Talk about, you had a WWE match. You were on WWE TV in 2015. I believe you teamed with Darren Young. Now, if my memory serves me correctly, and you can correct me on this, sir, I believe they did the whole thing where this is where, like, the primetime players, where they were going to start to get them back together and give them the run with the tag titles down the line. Just talk about the old WWE experience and, doing that whole, just the overall experience.
Sure, that was hilarious. I've had somewhat of a healthy correspondence with them for the last couple of years. When I first got into the business and I didn't understand how anything really worked outside of a fan perspective, I thought I was just going to go to school and I was going to apply to WWE. I didn't really understand a whole lot. So maybe 5 or 6 months into my training, I had reached out to them, probably a little early, and I had conveyed that I was interested in attending a tryout or attending whatever they had. Like, I really had no idea whatsoever how the whole process of getting employed by the company worked. They basically asked me to come down to a tryout where was it? It was in Ohio. It was at the Arnold's Sports Festivals, like the Arnold's Classic. They did like a public tryout. Unfortunately, it was the day that Bill DeMott, I think, had resigned or was fired. I'm not entirely sure exactly what happened with it, but I got to see him that day. Matt Blue and Prince Albert took over the tryout that particular day, and it was great. I did very well, and they had put me on some of the backstage background stuff on the Western loops for a while, which basically just means anytime they're in the West, they're going to call me. It's going to be backstage. I always brought my gear. They just show up, and if they need something, they would ask you to do it. Sometimes you'd have to go in front of the agents, the rosters, and the producers and stuff like that. So it's just kind of in the mix at almost virtually a non-existent level. And one day, Regal came up to me and he was just like, hey, he's like, I hope you don't mind, but I volunteered you for something because I trust you and I think that you would be able to pull this off. And I'm not sure about everybody else here. I was like, okay, sure. What do you need? And he's like, do you have your gear? I was like, of course. And he goes, there's an angle that we need to get over tonight. Just speak with Finley and he'll give you the rest of the details. He goes, have fun, enjoy yourself. I said, sure. So I spoke to Finley and basically just told me the rundown that they needed to get this primetime players thing going again. Speak with Victor and see what spots that they want to, put together and do. And I went and talked to him and basically just kind of put it together within 60 minutes to an hour, I think. It's just very random. It was fun. It was great. It was very surreal walking down the WWE ramp because since I was a little kid, I've always dreamed about walking down that stage. So it was almost like a very weird deja vu. I wasn't nervous. I wasn't scared. It just felt very natural. And I don't know if that's ever going to translate to people, but I wasn't nervous or freaked out about anything. Like I was actually really, really excited and pumped to do it. And yeah, it's just a simple, small spot. And it was funny how much it, versus everything else I had done. But it was great. All those people were really fun to work with.
Now, I'll give you a funny story because I remember the whole Ascension thing, and it's so funny because people talk, that's another thing where they go, oh, but they're losing, oh, they're doing this. Like, it really doesn't matter. They're on TV. They're getting time like we mentioned. And it's so funny because I've seen Rick Victor ever since he was on the independent scene as Apocalypse. I remember I was at a Ring of Honor show on Long Island and he wrestled Samoa Joe, and I'm like, oh, that's cool. It's a guy getting opportunities. So again, with the whole wins and losses thing like we mentioned before, that's just, I figured I'd share that tidbit, because here's a guy who's been busting his butt on the indie scene. That'd be Rick Victor. Titus O'Neil and Darren Young have been doing their thing, and people will say what they want about them. And the same with Conor O'Brien. I mean, just, it's another thing. It's just, again, working hard.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I have nothing negative to say whatsoever about it. They were all really cool people to work with. We all went out there. We had fun. We did what we needed to do, and it panned out how it panned out. But, yeah, it was super cool. I really didn't, a lot of people, they get the background work and they get the small spots and they put it on blast. I personally, for what I wanted for myself long term, I really didn't see it as a big deal. And I don't mean that in a pretentious or an egocentric way. I mean, it is significant that you got to be on, one of the longest running late night television shows probably ever in human history. People don't think about it like that, but that is what it is. Now, I was very grateful to get that spot, but I didn't try to over project it like a lot of people do, because I was like, that's not really what I want for myself long term. I maybe reposted it once or so. I didn't really have to. The whole world was reposting it, or at least from people who knew me. And it's just amazing how long that's followed me. And it's been flattering, actually, that people even remembered. I was literally there for a cup of coffee. And I was always very flattered by it. I was super flattered by it. And I remember there was such a reverse blowback from the Las Vegas audience that I was wrestling with at the time. They took it so offensively. They were like, you could be doing this or you could be doing that. And they just throw you out there in that capacity. It's like they didn't even say your name. And like for months, they were chanting, say his name at the shows, which I thought was so cool. And I love that. I'm not somebody who just goes out there and goes through the motions. I listen to the crowd. And if the crowd gives me things, they're paying tickets. They want you to interact with them. I'll run with it. And I did. I just thought that was awesome. I was walking out there going, say his name, say his name. And when the announcer would say my name, the whole place would explode. It was like they just took it so offensively that I was used like that. I thought that was so cool. Again, it was very flattering. I wasn't bothered by any of it. The whole thing was cool,
Now, as far as WWE goes, I want to mention this name as well, because you got to work with him as well. He's a man who's been version 1. He's a man who's been broken. And he's a man who's been woken. Talk about working with Matt Hardy.
That was so awesome. Really, really cool. A bit of a horrific story regarding that. So I had at the time an avulsion fracture in my leg. And for some stupid reason, the first time this match was promoted, the promoter knew that I was not going to be there. He knew. But he decided to promote me being there anyways. And then they ran some sort of story at the time, because we were running on state television, that I was like arrested or kicked out of the building or something. They ran a video on it. And it pissed a lot of people off. I mean, a lot of people. There was a very, very significant attendance that night of people that were there to see me and Matt Hardy compete. So they did some little like swerve at the beginning of the show, pissed people off. I heard people were leaving. They were really upset. So the second time around, when we were promoted to be in the cage, like I was telling you, I had that avulsion fracture in my leg. I did not want to disappoint anybody. I was really pissed that the promoter went about it in that way, promoting me to be there. Excuse my French, but it made me look like an asshole. Because a lot of people, their perception of the presentation generally falls on us. They don't necessarily understand that some of the decisions that are being made are out of our control. So I wasn't hurt the first time I couldn't make it. I was actually filming season 2 of Lucha, but I wasn't allowed to talk about it. So I just did not like the way that was dealt with the first time. And then the second time when I was promoted, I was hurt. I actually was wrestling Cedric Alexander, and a freak accident happened in the ring. I was overtraining that week, and something happened. But, yeah, it was bad. I could barely walk. So I just switched out of my trunks. I switched up to long tights, and I taped up my leg, and I did everything I possibly could. I was going to physio. I was trying to expedite the recovery process. I believe Justin Borden, who's a referee at Lucha Underground, was the ref that night, and I told him and Matt at the beginning of the show, I'm like, listen, I'm really, really hurt, but I did not want to miss this show. I'm going to give my best, and hopefully I don't have to go to the hospital afterwards, because it was a really, really severe injury, and I was trying to work through it. I wasn't really telling a lot of people about it. So I just told Justin, I said, every once in a while, check on me. So Matt and I put the match together, and we went in there, and we beat the holy crap out of each other. We had a great match, and I was in so much pain the entire time. And there's a spot in the match, again, freak accident, we're playing with toys. I have my leg, the one that's hurt, in the ladder, and Matt goes and hits the ladder with a chair, and he spiral fractured my tibia.
Oh.
I can laugh about it now, but I already had that one problem, and then my tibia spiral fractured into my ankle, into my foot. He had pulled my boot off. He was biting my toes. Like he was just doing all the crazy stuff that he does. And I was just like, I can't believe I'm on one leg for this shit. And I got to finish this match and climb up a fucking ladder. and grab a belt, my leg is broken. Like literally, my leg was broken, for lack of better words. And so yeah, I had to give him a Saito suplex with an avulsion fracture and a spiral fracture in my leg. I was running around. I was climbing ladders. Not his fault at all. It's just whatever happened that day. But despite all of that, I would have done the match over even knowing all that happened. I had a great time with him. And the crowd that night, because of how over he was and how over I was with the local demographic, was outstanding. I can still hear the crowd in my head years ago from then. It was a lot of fun.
And what's great about it, too, is, like, we mentioned the big names, and Matt Hardy, I mean, God bless you for finishing that match after all of that. I mean, but, like I said, I've seen that match. I really did enjoy the work that you guys put in. Pretty much, I'll tell you right now, Cross, I've enjoyed a lot of what you've done. I think you probably are one of the hardest working people I've seen, and there are a lot of great hard workers, but you always put in that effort, and I can just tell you right now, I really do look forward to seeing what the future holds for you.
Thank you sincerely. I'm glad that shines through as well. And as I said before, I'm never looking to mail anything in. I'm always going in there to give 110% and try to give something original from the last thing I did. I'm always trying to keep things fresh. And again, I'm always trying to engage the crowd. We have all these ideas and these concepts and things we put together, but I'm ready to completely make a full departure from all of that based on how the crowd is that night. I think that's what allows us to be artists. If we're not contractually obligated to perform a very specific narrative on television, and we're on the independents, we have that flexibility, we should definitely engage it. I appreciate it. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Now I have to mention this as well, because we talked about Lucha. I think on the independent scene as well, you got to work with the great Matanta Cueto, Mr. Jeff Cobb. Talk about working with Jeff.
Yeah, I wrestled Jeff numerous times, and I'm actually really happy about it. He's relocated to Las Vegas, which is where I live right now, and every once in a while we run into each other at the gym. Cobb is an awesome guy, an awesome wrestler, and that's another person I'm really, 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 really happy that, he's gotten that New Japan opportunity, because he's legit. And everybody knows he's legit. He's like world level legit. He's an Olympian. So there's no reason whatsoever why he shouldn't be showcased on some of the biggest stages in the world. He can do everything. Working with him has always been a pleasure. If I can ever spend time with him, personally, I do. Yeah, can't say enough good things about him. I run into him at the gym all the time, and we're actually thinking about, there's a Mixed Martial Arts Academy. It's a pro fight gym out here. It's called Syndicate Mixed Martial Arts Academy. We were actually talking about going into Tom Lawler's class. Tom Lawler's running like a MMA, freestyle, Greco-Roman, and catch wrestling class. We were actually going to start going and shooting a little bit, if our schedules permit it, just to keep the actual skills really sharp. And he would be the perfect person, for anybody to be working with his level of experience. I mean, it's awesome.
Now, you mentioned MMA. You got to also, that's another thing, because we talked about a lot of aspects of professional wrestling, but that MMA pro wrestling tie-in, the whole transition, my goodness. I mean, if you even look back at it, Ken Shamrock, Dan Severn, Tank Abbott, Ronda Rousey now doing her thing, Brock Lesnar, the transition back and forth. Now, I got to ask you, talk about the overall MMA wrestling transition and your thoughts on it, and did you see the CM Punk second fight against Mike Jackson?
I think the transition is, for some people it's natural, for others it's not. I think it's case by case. Mm-hmm. Obviously, with Ronda Rousey's transition, it's a perfect fit. I think she's been a wrestling fan forever, so if you're a fan of this and you've been watching it, mm-hmm. and you have a practical application of how to physically move somebody's body in the right way or the wrong way, you understand joint manipulation, you understand weight distribution, timing, and such. If you have a grappling background, I think you're gonna be fine. If you love pro wrestling and you've been watching it and you know how to move somebody, the transition, in my opinion, is fairly simple. Jack Swagger was another guy that people forget about, who was, I think he was a national champion. I know he was state.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he's a legit amateur wrestler. He was dumping people for a long time before he got into pro wrestling. That was another natural transition for him. I think it's really cool. Brock Lesnar obviously is Brock Lesnar. I've been a fan of his forever. I remember watching him with the NCAA stuff and thinking, this guy is an absolute freak. I was hoping he was going to go to the Olympics, but whatever. His life panned out just great, as we've all seen. So I did watch the CM Punk fight. I was a fan of CM Punk as a professional wrestler. Watched him in Ring of Honor back when, he was was like feuding with Jimmy Rave and like a long time ago. I was hoping that this MMA venture would have panned out better for him, because I would just like to see him do well as a human being, not even as a fan. I don't like to see people crash and burn. It's just not my personality. It's not my nature. But I don't necessarily know if this is the best fit for him, whether he wants to do it or not. I mean, how many concussions do you think he's had in his life?
A lot.
He's had knee surgeries. He's had like a very, very, very aggressive professional wrestling career. And it's not exactly even his fault that he's not able to perform at a better level than he is. When you take into consideration what's physically happened to him, what he's mentally endured, and, you know, his age. I hate to say it, but, you know, your body changes over time. Anybody who's over 30 years old listening to this knows exactly what I'm talking about. Like, your body changes. And to try to keep up with these young guys that are coming in, like, for what? Like, at this point, for what? I mean, if it's like, just because you want to, like, there's a lot of things we all want to do that we probably shouldn't do, you know, and it's his life and he can do whatever he wants. And I'm not here with you to ridicule him whatsoever, but I hope he finds something else in his life that provides fulfillment, you know, for him, where he's happy doing it. And I just don't want to see him. I don't want to see him get hurt. And I'm not saying that, you know, like a jerk. I'm just saying I don't necessarily, you know, based on what we've seen, what's the point of taking a third fight? Like, I think the smarter thing to do, and maybe there's no money in it, but the smarter thing to have done would have been to start going into Grappler's Quest, which is like catch wrestling. They hold them all over the world. There's a Grappler's Quest in every city and every state. Like, let me break it down like this. For young guys or young people or just people in general that want to fight, there's a certain progression that you should go through to acclimate yourself into what a professional fight is like. If you don't have any sort of competitive fighting background, you should probably get into wrestling and jiu-jitsu tournaments first, so you can feel what it's like to aggressively move with somebody that's trying to probably put you unconscious or break your joints without being punched or kicked. Then maybe start taking amateur boxing or kickboxing fights. Do things separately. Do all of these things separately, and then take an amateur or a professional MMA fight. Now, I'm very, very well aware, and anybody else is, that he had $1 million offers on the table immediately. So no one's ever going to turn that down. It's not going to be like, no, I'm not going to take the $1 million you're trying to give me and all this world exposure. I'm going to go fight an amateur competition where no one's paying attention. I'm not going to make money. Like, no one's going to do that. But if he wanted to do this long term and he wanted to do this smart and introduce himself into it in such a way where he's not such a fish out of water, that would have been the better way to do it. I would have actually encouraged him, had I known him, or, you know, a friend in his certain, you know, situation or circumstance, I would have encouraged him not to do it in the way that he did. I would have said, man, that money's going to be there. It's not going anywhere. You don't need to take it now. What you should do is you should do it like this. Because in 2 or 3 years, once you're warmed up and you're ready and you're going to be comfortable and your head movement's there and your lateral movement's there and you understand how to get in and out of things, then take that fight. But that's not what happened, and, you know, I'm still a fan of this. I just, I hope things, you know, change for him for the better.
And me too. You know what it is too? You know, a lot of people will say what they will, but you got to give him credit. I mean, that takes a lot of heart. MMA is no joke, and you got to, you know, applaud him for the effort and just trying something new.
And I do. You know, a lot of people don't. A lot of people are being overcritical, and I'm just not an overcritical person. You have one life, and he had an experience that, you know, whether it was good or bad, he still had an experience he can somewhat find enjoyment from at some level that a lot of people won't ever have. And, you know, I think on that merit, that's pretty cool. And I don't blame him whatsoever or hold it against him like a lot of people do for the way he approached this and what he did. It just is what it is. And I agree with you. I think you know, him putting his heart into it, he obviously loves it. He did everything he could to prepare for it. He went out there and did what he could, and kudos to him for that, sure.
Exactly. Now, I'm going to say this right now, and I'll pull back the curtain because we're coming towards the end here, and I'll throw the invitation out to you, sir. Anytime you want to come back on the show, I'll be more than happy to have you.
Oh, thank you very much. I appreciate that. And I really appreciate the fact that you and everybody else actually has these platforms for us, because, Once upon a time, this didn't exist. And I just got to say, I'm very grateful for having the opportunity to do this stuff with you. Anyone who's spreading any sort of positive awareness about sports entertainment or pro wrestling or however you want to approach it or observe it, I really appreciate it, because without a fan base or a demographic, none of this stuff would exist. So sincerely, thank you to you.
You're very welcome. And I'll pull back the curtain very briefly, and I'll apologize to you if you guys heard an alarm before, like a phone ringing and then like a caller ID kind of thing. I set an alarm mostly, and sometimes I do forget to turn it off, and this is one of those times, because I'll admit to my fans here and to you, sir, I'm OCD as a motherfucker, so I like to set my alarms when I do these things and be very organized and on time. So I forgot to turn my alarm off, so I apologize if you heard a little background noise there.
That's all good.
So, all right, now, Impact Wrestling. Well, now, without giving any spoilers, what can we expect from you going forward? You took out Petey Williams. Somebody better you probably should call the police. Again, excellently done. I love the way it was executed. What can we expect from you going forward with Impact Wrestling?
You can expect me to have an immense amount of creative freedom. So you're going to get to see a lot of what I've done prior to being on television now. And you can expect to see a lot of mass violence.
And I think that pretty much sums it up. And sir, before I have you promote your social media and all that, if you could give any advice to any guy or gal that wants to pursue a career in professional wrestling, what advice would you give them?
A lot of people will give advice about headlocks and storytelling and all of this stuff. I'm going to say this. I'm going to go in a totally different direction, and it's going to be a sincere direction. For anyone who's interested in getting involved with pro wrestling, I'm going to tell everyone to develop your backup plan first. If you are considering going to some sort of post-secondary education or picking up a trade or, securing work that's going to provide you with a healthy income where you can live comfortably, I'm going to tell everybody to do that first. And I'm telling you guys that because you will get hurt doing this. There is no way you will not get hurt doing this. Just the ratio and probability of something going wrong is very high all the time. It's very, very high. So think about it like this. If your main income is professional wrestling and you get hurt, now you have no income. So secure your survival in other departments, other areas of life before you pursue pro wrestling. It might take you till you're 26 or 27 to get a secure job before you can start training and trying to get on television or wrestling. That's fine. You don't have to listen to the structure that you need to get involved with this as early as possible because the WWE is looking for young people or this company that, none of that is important. It pales in comparison to your individual survival in life. So find work that you're comfortable doing and you're happy doing that provides you with a healthy income where you can live within your means or take care of your family. Do that first for the very reason that you will get hurt. And secondly, live, travel, develop, and grow as a person. Not only just for pro wrestling, but for your own development as a person. I've seen a lot of people become so overly consumed, not even just with pro wrestling, but with a job, that they stop following world events. They don't go on vacation. They stop learning. They don't read. They have no other interests other than their work. It's not healthy. It's totally not healthy. Your development as a human being is going to strengthen your character. It's going to provide you with more wisdom and experiences in your life. And believe me when I tell everyone this, that translates to who you're going to be as a performer, as a professional wrestler on TV. You can tell, and I don't mean this in a derogatory way, I'm shooting straight with everybody. You can tell who would probably be boring in real life from seeing them on television, because there is an essence of sincerity that bleeds through what they're doing. There are some guys that are flat that are on TV, and it's because they're flat in real life because all they do is wrestling. Watch movies, watch TV, have interests. Don't stifle your development as a human to improve your wrestling work rate or become so obsessed and driven with this. It's a trap, and that's the best advice I could give.
Okay, beautifully said. And I want to say this to you, sir. Before I actually have you promote the social media, one more question I just have. As far as Impact Wrestling goes, and you said we can expect, but any particular opponents that you're looking forward to working with? Because I know there's a lot of Lucha Underground talent there as well. Anybody you particularly want to get back in the ring with, or would like to get in the ring with for the first time?
3 people.
Good.
Johnny Mundo,
Mm-hmm.
Phoenix,
Mm-hmm.
and Pentagon.
And I'm sure everybody listening will be looking forward to those matches. Cross fingers for the future. And I'm going to tell you right now, man, again, I truly wish you nothing but the best going forward.
Thank you. And to you as well, and all of your endeavors as well.
Thank you. And, sir, I'm going to step back now. Floor is yours. Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, upcoming events. Go right ahead.
The easiest way to follow anything I am doing, I just recently set up a website just a couple months ago. It's super simple. KillerCross.com. Cross with a K. KillerCross.com. That has all of my media, which is basically my whole career before you've ever even seen me on TV. It's under media. I have a free YouTube channel that's on that website. All my merchandise links are on that website. My Facebook, IG, Twitter, everything is attached to that website. So if you want to just go to a one and done, check out my website. You can add everything from there. I've got probably 75 to 80 videos completely free of vignettes that I can guarantee you've never seen anything like them. They're all up there. If you're not familiar with me, or you are, check it out anyways. Take a look, enjoy. It's all there for you guys.
All right, so I'll put the link to killercross.com, and everything will, obviously, like you said, will be in the website, but I'll include your Twitter, Instagram, and everything as well, so everybody can check you out. That is not a problem at all.
Thank you very much.
You're very welcome. So, before we do close out, any final words for your fans, sir?
Think about the future.
Well said. Cross, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you for having me.